So when you have a traumatic experience, this is stored right within ourselves, literally. Your emotions have a motor cortex function, which is connected to the brain, yes? Meaning that they initiate physical responses right from the physical body, we could say. When those physical responses are not completely released, they become stuck. So animals and babies do not store as such trauma in their system, because many times when either an animal or a very like a baby, young, after such an overwhelming experience, there has been very extensive studies and facts showing that animals and babies would like shake it all out. They would tremor it all out. So that is the processing out of that overwhelming or shocking experience, which we call trauma. So trauma can be experienced as painful, shocking, and sensations in our body tells us something about what is going on within us. Tight areas holding onto something. So we carry not only the memory and feelings connected with that experience, but we remember it physically as well. So this is one of the biggest tricksters of reliving trauma, is because in the now, the body cannot differentiate between the past and the now, because it carries the past experience in a cellular level, yes, within the nervous system. And since in that moment of this happening, that energy was not shaken out, it has been trapped within this physical body, which is the nervous system. And when it becomes trapped, that energy that has been experienced becomes trapped. Because of that block, one keeps reliving past life traumas over and over and over, not finding a way out. Please note too, we are not really speaking of normal triggers here. It is very different. People can mix this up. It is different. A trigger is when some energy moves inside you, and somehow, you can manage and breathe it in and soften your body and maybe a bit of movement and move it out. But a trauma trigger is not like that. A trauma trigger, one would feel helpless, no power, helpless. Many times this is what we experience, helplessness, out of controlness, because it is a force, since it has been twitched in the nervous system, creating a damage within the nervous system. The energy becomes trapped, or else you could say frozen. It's like it freezes. So as you know already by now, working with health in our nervous system, there is this like electricity passing with such a high voltage in our nervous system. Think of a lightning, and then that lightning finding a block. That is what we experience. A huge tremor. Yes, a huge tremor of shaking and not knowing how to deal with it, because it's so big. It has become so big. So trauma healing, it's a very delicate subject. And it's not the same, just like anyone gets a trigger of some emotion coming up. It requires a lot of love, a lot of patience, a lot of dedication as well, to find your strength bit by bit. But you can only really do so much with trauma release, because it's intense, very intense. There's only so much you can handle every time. And the more your nervous system upgrades, yes, and strengthens, well, the more you start gaining strength to process that frozen energy. But it is always quite intense. Okay, it's very intense. Of course, it is possible to heal trauma. Everything is possible. Everything is possible, no matter how challenging or how difficult that is experienced. Okay, so everything is possible, but trauma may take a longer time for you to fully heal it. Opening or attuning or realizing a higher consciousness as yourself helps to a certain degree. It only helps because it strengthens you as that light of consciousness. And that can, of course, support the trauma release, but it doesn't mean that if you open or you become fully aware, fully conscious, everything is gone. No. You can still be dealing with traumas in your nervous system. As you heard yesterday, the nervous system is the physical aspect of the body. When we calibrate with kinesiology, it's very clear to see that the nervous system calibration is the lowest. Yeah? So that is also for you an indication to clear any illusion of opening to full consciousness and now all is perfectly healed. Okay? It does require more time for the nervous system to catch up, because your nervous system is the physical aspect. And so be patient. Okay, many times we resist ourselves as we are right now. And that is one of the most biggest problems. Resisting ourselves as we are. Wanting to be something else. Not owning fully what is here. That is one great resistance of not owning what is still here, what still needs to heal. Something else to share about trauma that is quite interesting as well is that although it's relived in the now and not being able to differentiate between is this really true or not, because it feels so real to you. You think, yes, this outer experience has created this, but actually it is not. It is the carrying of that memory of those twitched, damaged nervous system holding that frozen energy that keeps you experiencing that tremor, that fear over and over again. And there also has been studies that that moment of the trauma experience when it actually happened is totally different than what you have molded this experience to be. Wow. Yeah, this is very important to really get that even although you keep experiencing the same trauma in your body, yes, your body starts shaking, your body starts trembling, okay? And with that comes the memory, the experience in the now, which you are not able to handle. And that is actually totally different from when it initially took form. So even your own experience in the now is not actually correct. It has just been molded out of fear, out of insecurities that experience has given you. So that was like an initiator, and with that you grabbed all other parts with it. So I can explain a bit more simplistic, and you added to it insecurity, you added the fear to it, you molded it, and it became something else, unrealistic. And it became unrealistic only because in that initial moment, no one told you what to do. Because to top it off with this, We were brought up, I'm sure that a few of you at least have experienced this, where the parents, when something happened, they try to control you. For example, something happens and the child cries, the parent will come and say, "Stop crying. Don't cry, this is wrong, you should not cry." That's just a very mild version. There is much more than that. So instead of teaching or allowing the natural biology of response of an overwhelming experience to that child or teenage, or even grown-ups can have a traumatic experience, but it's much more easier to work with it then, rather than being a young child. So instead of as parents or guides helping us or assisting us to shaking that experience out of the system, instead we were told how we should respond. And the way to respond is suppress your feelings, hold yourself. You're a boy, you shouldn't cry. You're this, you shouldn't do that. And that created damage. Because if we remained very natural to the biology of this system, just like an animal, they know. How do animals know and we don't know? What happened here? Because animals, when they come to a moment of threat, at first they can play it out that they're dead. They freeze. They freeze. And when it's safe, then they wake up and they shake it off, literally. So here, it is very clear to see that this system, we know it's a receiver-transmitter. Anything that's receiving from the outside, if it's held through overwhelm, becomes a shock, becomes a trauma. Then if it's not processed back out, it remains stuck in our system and damaging the nervous system. So definition of trauma is threat to life of self or others. And this is experienced whenever it's repeated. A big threat. There's a threat, there's a big danger. A red button is like beaming. Your system goes into that fight or flight mode. Your nervous system becomes like very tense, like ready to fight or ready to run away. These are responses that we see instantly through this mechanism, how it works, this fight or flight. So common responses involves intense fear because of this feeling of danger, which would not be real, really, but is experienced as real because it's in the body. The nervous system is responding and signaling exactly that. So this is why it can be very challenging, because your whole body is saying, I am in danger. So intense fear, helplessness, being totally helpless, loss of control, and threat. So trauma is in the nervous system and not in the event. So although we keep mentioning the past, or because of my past, or because of my childhood, this is also not so correct. It's a bit unnecessary to keep going back to some stories of the past and re-speaking of it, which tends to happen. Re-speaking of this trauma experience that, by the way, it is not really like that. It has been twisted. So that is not really necessary to keep bringing yourself in this way and saying, oh, because of what happened to me in my past. The way to heal trauma, if it's active in your system and you know of it, then you work with that intensity of the nervous system. Because that is what you need to harmonize, clear and heal and release. Just by going in your past and speaking of these past stories in the way you imagine them that they have happened is not really helping. But when you're doing healing work, when you're meditating, then yes, because you're in a deeper place, you're in a theta vibration, and in theta vibration you already have a lot of more power to transmute and heal. So speaking is one thing, it doesn't really bring any healing, really. So the best way is to meditate, and in your deepest meditation you can bring reharmonization and transmutation from your childhood, for example. This we will practice together today. We'll have a meditation exactly on this, and you can keep working on it on your own as well. Something else to add is that nearly most of humanity has experienced trauma. Has experienced an overwhelming experience which was not handled or processed appropriately. Something else to add to this, which is deeper, is that this too was part of the plan of mind control programs. Why? Because it is a fact that once you bring a certain traumatic experience to that individual, that being becomes very limited. Very limited. And so this is also, these were tactics even in wars and war zones and these camp zones, and all the tortures and all the everything that actually has been happening in the past was all part of the plan to create traumatic experiences through the individuals. Because that is so much easier to control humanity, to keep them within the mind programming matrix. But there is that aspect which is true. And so Yes, humanity has suffered a lot in the dark ages, in the suppressed levels of consciousness. And this is why it kept humanity in control. Because with trauma, the brain splits. You can literally put a part of it totally in the unconscious and live in a particular way how you have become programmed to be. There's a lot of healing to do, definitely. We are in a time of healing. It's not just you or you or you, it's all of us. All of us, every soul has experienced so many lifetimes, and some of them were unpleasant. And reincarnating into another body and also carrying what you need to heal in your next life. And also from your ancestors too. If you think of your mother's mother, go back, and see all that unconsciousness, all that deep suppression, all of those traumas, they all have landed right here. Because I don't know, maybe your family and your ancestors were all enlightened masters, I don't know. But most of our family and all generations, very few have done enough of healing in the past. But that does not matter, because now is the time for healing. Now is the time of liberation. Now is the beginning of a new era. So altogether, no matter what happened in the past, it does not really matter either. What matters is that we are responsible, not just for our personal self, but responsible in a greater way of healing this human consciousness out of deep suppression and oppression and abuse and manipulation into the freedom, into the true freedom, returning back to your true self. And with that comes all this healing, which is happening already. So this is why also the damaging in the nervous system, the pre-planned traumas to humanity, bringing poverty, bringing all sorts of life experience, which is not natural, by the way. Poverty is not natural. Fighting with another human being in wars is not natural. So these were all unnatural experiences happening on purpose as part of the plan of control to damage the nervous system, which is trauma. And what happens with that? You stay in a low vibration. You stay in a low consciousness. It's like closing the tap down. As you heard yesterday, majority of humanity, it's like 4% of the nervous system is really enlightened. Well, that is the effect of control. And now as humanity is awakening, and having so much assistance from above too, with higher energies, well, humanity now is starting on the path of liberation, healing thousands of years. all the way to this moment. And thus, with this dedication, with this responsibility, we are already creating a better future. So the key to resolving trauma involves unhooking the fear from tonic immobility, allowing the energies bound in immobility to be released and transformed. This, with the practice, with the Kriya practices, you are already strengthening and opening the nervous system and healing the nervous system. And yes, some points you will meet a wall. You will meet a wall where you hit a wall. And those are the moments of recognition that, okay, there is something more challenging to deal with, and in the right way, we can transform and release that trapped, frozen energy. So, some things about healing mechanisms of healing. Of course, we know the Kriya practices really help, and all the meditations and all the receiving higher consciousness, opening higher consciousness. All of this is helping, of course. Even eating good food, it's all helping. But for the trauma itself, one very great tool is touch. Touch is a very, very great tool. So physical touch, a focused attention, self-regulation. We'll speak about the self-regulation, self-containment, exercise, self-contact, self-therapeutic touch, and hand placements on the body. We will go through this as well, to induce homeostasis, to induce a harmonic, safe container for us. And hand positions for internal balance as well. So, as you can see, these are like tools that can help us to regulate these trapped energies. And it's kind of seeing it like when there's a pressure cooker, there's a pressure, and then there's that like release of steam. It's exactly in this way how you should look at trauma release. It's not about explosions or, it's already intense. There's already that pressure cooker. It's already pressurized like that. But you want to find a tiny area, a tiny part where you can very slowly release that pressure. So the way I have experienced trauma and trauma release, I could like put it in this way, like a pressure cooker, and then there's that like steam, very slowly, bit by bit. You can't do so much in one go because it's intense. It's already a lot when you're in it and with it. So physical touch, why is physical touch so important? Is because when we relive trauma, we are in a place of threat and danger and fear. Yes, these are the symptoms of that reliving the trauma. So fear, no control, of yourself, helplessness. So touch brings you in the body and feeling safe. Many times when one has experienced traumas in one's life, there is a very big tendency to be out of the body, to disassociate with the experience that is still in the body. So many times there is this big sense of separation and you being out of this body. This is why you experience helplessness and the sense of no control at all. So by coming to the body in those intense moments is you bringing yourself back into the body, because there's a tendency of not having any boundaries, living somewhere else. This is very big when it comes to trauma. So it's a way of healing is to come into the body and meet that experience, that memory which is still tremored inside of you. Because the tendency is to be out of the body, disassociate with this body. Like even in my experience, and I'm sure it's of course happening to others too, that I had no idea that I was so traumatized as a child. Until the age of maybe 28, I had no access, no idea. See the splitting of the brain, yeah? Totally in the unconsciousness, disassociation, totally. And even believing whatever this mechanism created to survive, until the trigger came true of memory, so it was not aware in the system, not linked. The brain splitting was so big, there was not even a link or a spark there. So that can also be possible too. Of course, for others, this could come the link in the brain much faster. Everyone has his own individual way, but I'm just speaking directly from my experience, how it came of this disassociation, not just from myself and the body, but internally the mind itself split. So touch and coming into this container and feeling safe. There's this gesture of crossing your hands and slightly squeezing. Even now, if you practice this for a moment, this holding yourself like a hug and a gentle squeeze into the arms. You take a moment here. You might sense this sense of safety coming to you. There's a relaxation happening in your parasympathetic nervous system. It starts to awaken. And a sense of you as this container as well. So like this, you are right here. And you bring yourself closer. And it creates a self-containment, a container of safety. So this practice in itself, if you experience this like threat, when this like trauma comes up, this trigger of trauma comes up, and you're in a danger zone, you think you're in the middle of a war. This is how you feel, literally. It's like you're in the middle of a war zone. And just by holding yourself and containing yourself to come back into the body, you might sense the trembling or the shaking or the fear. And just by holding yourself and breathing, so the breath is also very important. And exhaling through the mouth. And here, if you can manage into this position and containing yourself here, then you can tap into that tremor and release. It's like a phasing. It's like you phase into. You phase into. It can be very intense in this moment, but you like the pressure cooker here, and you allow a bit of steam. When you phase into, you allow a bit of steam to release. So this is a very good way. When you feel overwhelmed, and you feel helpless or out of control, you can try this. Become more familiar with the effects and with the inner safety and grounding and loving embrace. And of course you can stop there, but if you have strength, then I would phase into that tremor a bit. I would like go slightly in it, and like a very deep shaking happens, but in a very internal way. And that is when I say the steam starts releasing, and with the breath. Of course, the breath is very important. You're soothing your nervous system, and once the parasympathetic nervous system activates, then you feel safe. You feel safe to do some transmutation, to work with those damaged nervous system parts, areas, and slowly starting to tap into those frozen energies. But only if you can handle it. If not, you can just simply hold yourself here until you become more familiar, because until this point you would already like disassociate or get out of your body or break down somehow. So it's a practice of familiarizing with any traumas. And bit by bit you will gain more strength. So it may be difficult for others to understand these form of triggers, because there can be some people who have not experienced such traumas in their lives. Very rare, but yes, possible as well. So many times one symptoms are hyperarousal. Yeah, this is very like experience, this hyperarousal of like a very strong like surge of energy. A trigger is an emotion, it's just like I'm triggered, some anger. Okay, work with it, pass it through. It's very different. But with a trigger of a nervous system damage, this is like your whole body becomes like a volcano instantly. Like instant fire, and sometimes your hand freezes, sometimes your mouth freezes, sometimes you start shaking like crazy. Like these are the symptoms as exactly responding through your physical body, your nervous system. Immobility, this like freezing, not being able to move. Yeah, and they're all very intense. They are all very intense. And nervousness, of course. Internal chaos. Mental chaos. Overwhelm. Fear and unsafety. And so it's so confusing, yes, for the system, for example, to be in such a peaceful paradise place. And this is how it happens. And yet one can experience such a big threat that in the midst of paradise, one experiences being in a war zone. So this hugging exercise, the goal is to calm the nervous system that we just practiced a bit together now, and to bring the self back into the body. Developing more body awareness and training, because it is a training, you're training your own nervous system to remember what it's like to be natural. So you use certain practices to regulate. And if you have strength, to phase into and release bit by bit. It can only be 1 minute or 2 minutes. It's already a lot when you're phasing into that tremor and working directly from that part of the neural pathway which has been clogged. Like these, I have seen them visually, like clogged and like literally like frozen, like a rock. Like imagine columns. These columns are the neural pathways when they connect. When it's healthy, the lightning, the force just passes through everywhere. It's okay, it's good. But when there's like a column of rock, that's good. That is what you experience with all these symptoms. Energy is stuck, can't move. It's frozen in that column, and you need to find ways how, with enough strength, to phase into that neural pathway, that connection which has been damaged, and slowly find ways how to start softening that frozen column. There's also another exercise. I've also experimented with this, and it's also good. It has its effects as well. And this one goes, you place one hand on your forehead. It's also a way how to regulate and come back into the body. And the other hand is on your heart. So this is also another mudra, you could say, where you place both hands here. And you connect your breath with your hands. So you breathe up to the hand on the forehead, And you breathe down and connect with the heart. You breathe up and breathe down to the hand. Your hand is on your heart at first. Yeah, at first it's here, so you keep it close. You can try this for a moment. And also be aware of any sensations also outside of you, outside of your body, around you. And then also you can shift internally, inside. Because of the tendency of disassociating, this helps you to recollect and come back into the body, filling the gaps and feeling the space in between your hands. And sense any sensations. And placing your attention on specific areas, deepening the perception of sensations in those areas. And switching from the outside environment is a practice into the inside environment. And with step 2, then you bring your hand from your forehead down onto your belly. And noticing the distance, the gap in between, and connecting that with your breath, feeling into any sensations first outside of you, your environment. And connecting, filling the gap, and then shifting inside your inner environment. I sense this like a tonic to the body, like a tonic effect. It helps to tone, regulate in a different, slightly different energy to it. You can slowly come back. You can keep your hands there if you want, but just to open your eyes. So as you can see, these are very powerful practice. We come to the next page about the psoas muscle. You have the diagram here. And as you already have noticed, we are doing quite a lot of deep stretches, especially in the hip area. Those very deep and long stretches. We're working directly on this muscle. So let's go through here and then we can discuss further. Humans store a lot of unexpressed emotions in the hips. This is very well known, but it goes much deeper than just emotional, unexpressed or processed energies. Mostly because the hips are the most stationary part of the body, where arms and legs move constantly, but the hips are often static. This is also another great way of seeing, like dancing can also be a tool to work with these unprocessed energies within the hips. And you can see many times people are quite stiff in the hips, and that is also reflecting that, you know, there is a lot of stored energies. However, there is another reason why they are such a sensitive area for people, why this is such a sensitive area. It's because that is the location of the psoas muscle, which some refer to as the seat of the soul. Maybe you've heard that terminology, the seat of the soul. It is one of the biggest muscles, very strong muscle in our system. The psoas major is the biggest and strongest muscle in your hips, flexors, which is also responsible for controlling the thighs and torso. Being that this muscle is found at the very core of your body. It is the single muscle most deeply affected by your fight or flight response. This is why it's so good in any yoga practice. And if you also would like to bring more like healing aspects into the yoga classes, do focus on these deep stretches and holding those postures long, opening the hips and stretching the psoas muscle. It's a very good way to clear and process these stored energies. And this is also why, as you know, the way usually asana practice we breathe is inhaling from the nose and exhaling through the nose. And you might ask, why is she always saying exhale through the mouth? But the reason I'm encouraging you to exhale through the mouth is because we are tuning with certain storage places in our system, especially in deep, long stretches, And yes, learn how to connect your breath at least into that place and process, release stored energy. And for that requires you to exhale through the mouth. From the nose, the clearing of energy is not that effective. So only in certain postures, I'm sure you are aware of, saying exhale through the mouth. The reason is exactly to release energy, to release stored energies. Because also human beings have not been really taught how to maintain our energy system in the day-to-day life, how to release energy. And it's also a great tool for yourself to become more familiar with, instead of holding and tightening and contracting. Aside from being integral to your body's structure and safety response system, it is also a very hard muscle to stretch. So yes, it can be totally understood that when we do these deep, long stretches can be a bit challenging, a bit painful. So take care of that too, don't overdo it. But yes, since it's quite a strong muscle, it could be quite frigid, it requires some extra effort to work on the psoas muscle. So it tends to hold a lot of pain and stress. So apart from these deep yoga, asanas, deep stretches, deep postures, there is also something you can integrate, which is great to do this practice after a bit of stretch. So maybe after a yoga class, or if not a yoga class, make sure you do a good stretch to the body. And this we have very slightly introduced it in one of the sessions previously, where we laid down and we brought the soles of the feet together to a particular place, and then lifting the knees up to a certain degree, like fine-tuning a certain degree until the knees start shaking. And they start shaking then naturally. And ideally, the more you open your hips, the more you kind of drop into the practice, this shaking can become quite strong. And ideally you do this practice for 30 minutes. Yes. So as long as you find, because not everyone's position will be the same, yeah, but unless you find that you tune into, and with that specific tension you trigger that shaking response, and working with your spine as well, your pelvis forward and back. We come to the next page about the psoas muscle. You have the diagram here. And as you already have noticed, we are doing quite a lot of deep stretches, especially in the hip area. Those very deep and long stretches. We're working directly on this muscle. So let's go through here and then we can discuss further. Humans store a lot of unexpressed emotions in the hips. This is very well known, but it goes much deeper than just emotional, unexpressed or processed energies. Mostly because the hips are the most stationary part of the body, where arms and legs move constantly, but the hips are often static. This is also another great way of seeing, like dancing can also be a tool to work with these unprocessed energies within the hips. And you can see many times people are quite stiff in the hips. And that is also reflecting that, there is a lot of stored energies. However, there is another reason why they are such a sensitive area for people, why this is such a sensitive area. It's because that is the location of the psoas muscle, which some refer to as the seat of the soul. Maybe you've heard that terminology, the seat of the soul. It is one of the biggest muscles, very strong muscle in our system. The psoas major is the biggest and strongest muscle in your hips, flexors, which is also responsible for controlling the thighs and torso. Being that this muscle is found at the very core of your body. It is the single muscle most deeply affected by your fight or flight response. This is why it's so good in any yoga practice. And if you also would like to bring more like healing aspects into the yoga classes, do focus on these deep stretches and holding those postures long, opening the hips and stretching the psoas muscle. It's a very good way to clear and process these stored energies. And this is also why, as you know, the way usually asana practice we breathe is inhaling from the nose and exhaling through the nose. And you might ask, why is she always saying exhale through the mouth? But the reason I'm encouraging you to exhale through the mouth is because we are tuning with certain storage places in our system, especially in deep, long stretches. And yes, learn how to connect your breath at least into that place and process, release stored energy. And for that requires you to exhale through the mouth. From the nose, the clearing of energy is not that effective. So only in certain postures, I'm sure you are aware of, saying exhale through the mouth. The reason is exactly to release energy, to release stored energies. Because also human beings have not been really taught how to maintain our energy system in day-to-day life, how to release energy. And it's also a great tool for yourself to become more familiar with, instead of holding and tightening and contracting. And also, when this shaking takes form, you will also notice that the shaking might move to different parts of your body. So sometimes, let's say there has been a trauma and this part becomes frozen. Ideally, you bring your movement up to this area as well. Okay, so you want to fine-tune places in your body where they're frozen and bring that shaking into that part as well. So that usually comes with a therapist who is like, working more specifically one-on-one, and that's where the therapist would bring the hand onto the upper part, for example, so that tremors up and focuses. But even many times, naturally, I have seen that people start shaking. Like it doesn't remain in the knees, it goes up, it moves through the spine, it moves in the shoulders, maybe even the whole body starts shaking. You don't know. It's really like to start fine-tuning first into the practice. No, this practice is designed for trauma release. They have used it for post-wars. Yeah, it is designed. Yeah. And you're not really like stretching fully down, you're just finding the proper position to trigger those stored energies. Yeah. So you're not like in a full stretch either. It's just an uncomfortable alignment to allow that shaking to take place. If the shaking does not happen at all, well, it means there's a lot of more frozen energies. Okay, you have to somehow, with the assistance of a therapist, in this case, to trigger it, because the body needs to shake. The body needs to shake. So if there's a static, like nothing's happening, keep attuning, keep trying to find, maybe push your heels further out. You have to explore a bit your body. When you're ready, you can close your eyes. Returning into yourselves, returning back, slowing down and returning back into yourselves. Sensing your breath. Very softly into your being. I invite you to have an overall sense of yourself right now. With the intention of bringing very specific healing onto our childhood, into the now, right here. I invite you to open your heart like a doorway, opening. Opening into the fourth dimension through your heart. And from this opening of your heart, inviting here You as a child, in any way, in this instance, any image, any memory that comes to you right now. Any age, any life situation. Look at that child. Look at yourself. And look around him or her, where she's at. The environment around. The colors around. The feeling that's in that space or that room, that child. And now walk to her or him and hold the hands. Looking into the eyes of that child with an open heart, stating it is okay, you are held in love. You are safe now. And rearrange that memory into a beautiful, loving experience with love and safety. Give a hug to that child. With your hug, reharmonizing and balancing that timeline in the now. State to her or him, you are free, you are loved. And when you're ready, you can say goodbye. And slowly come back in this here and now. Come back in your hearts. Come back to this moment. Come back fully in yourself. If at any moment you wish to use any gestures, you are more than welcome to. When you're ready, I invite you to, from your heart, open another doorway. Another doorway into another timeline of your past. You as a child or teenager or any age, any image, any part, aspect of you inviting. Meet that being, that child or teenage or grown up. Look around in that environment. And come closer to you, holding the hands and looking into the eyes of that child. Connecting with the heart, sending healing into that specific timeline. And reorganizing that experience in the most loving, harmonious ways. Move around, be happy, dance. Show that love is very healing. Love can transmute anything. Saying to that other, you are understood now. You are heard. You are loved. Always have been. Thank you. Giving each other a hug. Realigning, harmonizing the timeline. And in your readiness, saying goodbye and slowly returning here. Slowly coming back, fully here in your body. Soften your heart. Allow. Make peace with any residues. Make peace with a total acceptance, a total forgiveness, harmonizing any residues in your loving presence. Theta vibration everywhere, transmuting and healing. Violet light is all around you, above you, inside you. returning all to a loving presence. Allow the bigger heart to envelop all that needs harmony. And violet light everywhere. And take your own time to slowly return back. I do invite you to remain in silence, at least for like 15-20 minutes. Because there is a very strong healing energy around you. So to maintain that healing energy, just for like 20 minutes, just to rest, and just to be with yourself a bit, would be very good. So this is a very beautiful way how you can go in previous timelines and rearrange the harmonics. Inner child healing is also quite essential for our healing. Very well. Thank you all.